Intern, Level 4 by n4thy. Chapter 1. Peter often found himself musing over the possibility that the universe might be conspiring against him, orchestrating a grand design to dismantle his life. One could argue that he was being dramatic. There was a part of him that saw this as an escape from the relentless bullying he endured. He dreamed about Tony showing up just for a brief span of 2 minutes. The mere thought of Flash's dumbfounded expression almost made the ordeal seem worthwhile. Almost. Yet Peter knew he couldn't succumb to the temptation for such pettiness. Even if Tony, for reasons unbeknownst to him, did care about Peter, the fact remained that Tony was a billionaire whose time was far too precious to be wasted. So, Peter resigned himself to reality. In his current problem, Mr. Stark seemed to be the only beacon of hope, the only individual who genuinely engaged with Peter in his work at the tower. Among the sea of interns, only a few might recognise him, 2 or 3 whom he actually worked with, and even then, the likelihood of them being the appointed tour guide or among the interns present that day was slim. Peter was screwed. The notion of being associated with Tony Stark, no matter how dreaming it was alien to Peter. It would be an odd thing. Why would a figure of Tony Stark's stature choose to virtually adopt a random teenager? Peter's intelligence was indeed remarkable, but it hardly seemed justification enough for such a close bond with one of Stark's wealth and fame. He knew that Tony would never have looked his way twice if not for Spider-Man, and if that hurt a little, no one has to know. His exclusive clearance level and the distinction of being the only high school intern at the company were already bound to provoke curiosity. Peter couldn't afford to call more attention to himself, especially given his secret identity as Spider-Man. If luck were on his side, the guide for the day might turn out to be someone he knows, which would be all the luck he needed. Perhaps he could even persuade Mr. Stark to adjust his clearance level for the day, providing tangible evidence of his internship without raising any suspicions. "Dude, this is going to be absolutely incredible!" Ned's enthusiasm brought Peter's attention back to the present moment. A slight irritation crept into Peter's demeanour towards his best friend. "You've already been there. What's got you so thrilled this time?" "Well, I've only ever seen the penthouse. Mr. Stark's lab is something you have to all to yourself. It's going to be awesome to see the other labs in the tower," Ned replied. A feeling of warmth enveloped Peter's heart at Ned's words. Tony's trust was something he had never expected to receive, and yet the truth of their relationship would remain hidden, leaving others to assume he was lying. Ned, however, was blameless in this, and so Peter simply nodded in understanding. As Mr. Harrington continued to speak, his words becoming a distant murmur, Peter felt a presence approaching from behind. Without turning, he knew exactly who it was. "Ready to be humiliated, penis?" the familiar taunt came. Before Peter could formulate a response, MJ interjected sharply. "You know, Flash, I'm really starting to believe you've developed a crush on my boyfriend." Flash's gaze turned to MJ, filled with a rage so palpable that Peter momentarily thought he might have to intervene. However, Flash merely let out a disdainful snort and retorted, "He wishes," and left. Peter's lips curved into a smile as he gazed at MJ. "God, she is amazing." "Thank you," he uttered, with warmth reaching his eyes. "Whatever, loser," she retorted, with a playful smirk dancing on her lips. Her voice then softened to a gentle murmur, meant only for his ears. "Don't worry, your father will sort it out." A sigh escaped him. MJ had taken to tease him that Mr. Stark was his father, all because of the awestruck expression that painted Peter's features whenever he recalled their shared moments during bonding time. In the deepest of his heart, he wished for it to be true. There were times where the word "dad" almost slipped through his lips when addressing to Tony, a thought that flushed his cheeks with embarrassment. "Not my dad," Peter whispered, the words barely a breath as he let his forehead fall onto the table with a muted thud. "All right, what happened, kiddo?" Tony's voice broke through the quiet of the lab. Peter took a second to realise Tony was actually talking to him. Yes, it made sense. They were the only 2 there. "What do you mean?" You've been off the whole evening, Tony pointed out, giving him that "I'm not buying whatever BS excuse you think you can give me." Look, you didn't even blink when I joked about making a real lightsaber. Peter's eyes popped. Wait, for real? Tony let out the laugh. Nah, just trying to snap you out of it. Peter felt his spirits drop. Come on, don't do that, Tony said, coming over and giving Peter's shoulders a squeeze. Spill it, what's going on? Peter inhaled deeply. It's this school trip, he started, glancing up at Tony, who seemed ready for the full story. We're coming here. Tony's face scrunched up. That's it. Then, how come I didn't hear about this? Peter snorted. Come on, Mr. Stark, high school trips are way below your pay grade. Tony just hummed in agreement. They chilled in silence for a bit, at least that's what he thought, before Peter felt Tony's hands guiding his face up. You still with me, kid? Tony looked genuinely worried. Yeah, Peter replied. You spaced out there. Did I? Tony's look of concern deepened, and Peter half expected him to drag him off to the med bay. So, why is this trip such a big deal? Tony finally asked. Peter felt like crawling into a hole. He was being childish and dramatic, wasting Tony's time and their cool lab session. Ned accidentally blurted out about my internship here, Peter explained, the words rushing out. It wasn't really his fault. I mean, people were listening to our conversation. Then this kid who always bullied me told everyone that no way Puny Parker has an internship at SI, since the company doesn't even hire high schoolers, which is true, and I'm not an intern here, so I guess he's right. It doesn't matter if I don't brag about this, because he keeps bringing it up, and now he has made it his mission to prove during the trip that I'm a liar. I just want to punch him, but I can't hurt a kid, and if... Pete, take a breath, Tony cut in. Peter realised he was rambling and his chest was tight. Tony started doing breathing exercise with him, all gentle and caring, and Peter felt like bawling. When he finally calmed down, all he wanted was a hug from his dad. Wait, what? And some sleep. You good now? Tony asked. Peter just nodded. Want me to crash a field trip and show everyone how cool you are? Peter sat up straight. No way, Mr. Stark. That'd be epic, but it'd just make people suspicious. Why would you know me? And why would you choose me to work with you? You're an awesome kid, Pete. Crazy smart and with such goodness in your heart, Tony said, smile in his voice. Peter's cheeks went hot. There are tons of kids like this out there, Tony, he mumbled. You know Spider-Man's the only thing that made our, relationship possible. Tony was quiet for a beat. Peter knew he wouldn't argue. So, can I help at all? Tony finally asked. Peter thought for a second. Actually, yeah, maybe just change my clearance to normal intern level and have the generic AI announce me instead of Friday? That's all? Tony looked surprised. Yeah, if they call me out as an intern in the lobby, that's all the proof I need. I might even bump into some of the interns I actually know. Tony shook his head, amazed at Peter's simplicity. Deal. Just let me know the date of this trip of yours and I'll sort it with Friday. Peter's grin was huge. This might work out just fine. The morning of the field trip began terribly. As soon as he woke up, he felt the scratchy sheets against his skin, which didn't actually bother him the night before. Then he smelled something burning and heard the loud city noises that hurt his ears. This day is going to be so long, he thought. The burnt smell was his breakfast that May messed up. After a shower and changing several times, he finally felt less crappy. He chose an old hoodie that used to belong to Ben and some worn jeans. The noises were still there, but he tried to ignore them. Are you sure you're okay to go? Was the first thing May asked him that morning, looking worried. Yeah, I'm good. Love you, May, he replied, took an apple and left for school. As Peter made his way to Stark Industries, the world around him seemed to dissolve into a hazy mist. It was as though he was being guided by an unseen force, guiding him forward until he found himself standing in the grand lobby. Peter, please, I need you to talk to me, MJ implored, her voice laced with a palpable urgency. What? Peter's attention snapped back to the present, really acknowledging her presence for the first time. Dude, you've been on autopilot. MJ and I have been trying to get through to you for the past half hour, and all you've done is nod. and Ned chimed in, his voice tinged with concern, emanating from Peter's right. Really? Peter questioned, a hint of surprise in his tone. Maybe you should consider staying with your dad. You don't seem up for this trip, MJ suggested gently, her hand squeezing his reassuringly. Before Peter could muster a response, Flash barged into the conversation. Trying to run, Parker? Peter was going to retort, but Mr. Harrington summoned the group. The students congregated near the inspection area, MJ and Ned shooting him worried looks, but following the teacher's order. It was unlike his usual route through Mr. Stark's private elevator. Peter stood amongst his classmates in the unfamiliar procedure. He watched as each student was called forth to receive a visitor's badge, printed with their name and visitor status. Peter was about to proceed with his customary AI identification when Flash interrupted. Why doesn't Parker need a badge? The security guard, whom Peter recognised thanks to Happy, glanced over. Because he works here, he informed Flash. Do you have your ID card, kid? Yes, Mr. Goldstein, Peter replied, retrieving his ID card. It had his name, photo, inside chip and logo of SI that he never really uses, but Happy insisted because it was impossible to every security guard to know and recognise him from his backpack. Flash shot Peter a scowl, but stepped aside. One by one, each student passed through with their visitor pass until only Peter and Mr. Harrington remained. Taking a deep breath, Peter moved forward. Parker, Peter, Intern, Level 4, announced the robotic voice, entirely different from Friday's. There, this was the only thing he needed. Thank you, Mr. Stark. MJ and Ned's smiles greeted him on the other side, their warmth cutting through the overwhelming feeling that he had with all the sounds, lights and smells. Yet he still heard some of his classmates whispering about the fact that he was really not lying. It kind of hurts to realise that basically no one believed him, but when Mr. Harrington offered a supportive thumbs up after he passed the scanner himself, Peter felt a little better. Then they proceeded to a designated area to deposit their belongings, including electronic devices, for legal formalities. And only after that were they finally introduced to their tour guide. Good morning, Midtown High, greeted a young woman with golden locks, her voice a melody in the bustling lobby. The class greeted her back. I am Gwen Stacy, and today I will be leading you through the wonders of Stark Industries. Peter's gaze snapped to the source of the familiar voice, and there she stood, a beacon of warmth in her smile. Gwen, a fellow intern whose brilliance in the lab was only matched by her ambition to secure a position at the UK branch of Stark Industries. A smile graced Peter's lips. Ah, Pete, Boss mentioned you'd be here today, she exclaimed with a joy that was infectious. Of course he did. Wait just a minute, you know Parker? Flash interjected, disbelief colouring his tone. Gwen, momentarily taken aback, retorted sharply, Of course, we've shared labs before. Mr. Thompson, I must insist you cease this nonsense about Peter's internship. We have the evidence filed in the principal's office for months now, Mr. Harrington interjected, drawing the collective gaze of the students. Apologies, Miss Stacy. Please proceed. Well, fuck. That easy, eh? With that, Gwen began to talk all about the beginning of Stark Industries as they were ushered towards the first floor they would be attending. This floor, which had the chemistry and biology labs, was where Gwen truly shone, her passion for the sciences evident to all of them while she explained everything. Peter tried to absorb her words, but his mind sought refuge in a distant place, a defence against the sensory assault of lights, sounds and textures that surrounded him. Only the gentle squeeze of MJ's hand in his served to ground him. As lunchtime approached, the pressure of MJ's hand brought him back to reality. Peter, are you okay? Gwen inquired, concern evident in her features. Back to his surroundings, Peter found himself seated alongside Ned, MJ and Gwen. A curse slipped through his lips. What? He managed to utter. Their eyes bore into him, laden with worry. Sorry, he muttered, shaking his head. I'm all right, just... Their stares intensified. I've yet to introduce you to MJ and Ned, he added, wanting to change the subject, only to heighten their concern. They've already made their presentations, Gwen informed him. Have they? Peter, listen, you need to go find Mr. Stark. You're not okay right now, MJ implored. Ned joined them. "She's right. You don't need a tour to see Stark Industries anyway." "I could call Mr. Hogan for you. He can gather your belongings and escort you to Mr. Stark," Gwen offered. Peter resisted, irritation bubbling within. "There's no need to call my dad, Mr. Stark. Or Happy." "What the hell, Peter?" A silent exchange passed between Ned, MJ and Gwen. In time, after a shared meal that he doesn't remember at all, they said their goodbye to Gwen. That would be their guide exclusively for the first part of the tour, and continued their journey through the tower. MJ and Ned tried everything to engage Peter during their visit to the robotics and informatics lab, but to no avail. Peter remained inside his own head. Vivian Quinn was their second tour guide. Peter had glimpsed her once, but never truly met. The tour unfolded in a hazy, just like the first part. Amidst the various interns, he saw one more person that he knew. It was Victor. "Yo, P!" Victor approached and seemed to not notice the presence of anyone else, his hand in Peter's shoulder being a horrible sensation. "You need to come help me with—" "Vic, he's on a field trip. Assistance is not on his agenda right now," Vivian interjected. "Oh, fuck." Victor's gaze darted around, noticing the curiosity of the students. "Sorry, mate, I always forget you're in high school." Peter, for the most part, remained limited to the occasional smile and nod. He did say hello to Victor, though. The thing is that he wanted to engage in a conversation with Vic and learn what he could possibly be doing now, but he felt incapable, only wishing he could be in his room. So after the tour wrapped up, Vivian took everyone to an area near the bathrooms and vending machines in case anyone needed something. MJ soon asked, "You good on your own? Don't want you to come with Ned?" She and Ned were among the ones who wanted to go to the bathroom. "Yeah, I'll be fine," he tried to be nonchalant. They were kind of worried, but figured it was no biggie since they'd be quick. Mr. Harrington tagged along with the group, heading to the stalls. Peter was thinking, all things considered, it was a pretty cool trip. Sure, he spaced out most of the time, and now his head's about to explode. But hey, no one's calling him out or getting suspicious. He's counting that as a win. His headache was intensifying, a crescendo of pain that threatened to shatter his composure as he took his distance from the rest of the group. The thoughts of the penthouse were only growing. There, he could find peace in his room, bathed in shadows, free from the cacophony of the outside world. Tony made sure of it. He meandered until he encountered a desk adorned with a jar, a smile flickering across his face. No way Mr. Stark had a hand in these aesthetic choices. No way. The headache was clearly taking its toll on his ears, so much that he flinched at the sound of Flash's voice so close. "What have you done?" the voice accused. Peter's eyes narrowed. "Excuse me?" "Whose dick did you suck to get a job here, Parker?" the voice sneered. A surge of heat coursed through Peter's veins, the insult striking a nerve like never before. What the hell? He had been nothing but silent throughout their entire trip, not once bragging about being an intern. He proved his point, and yet Flash couldn't get his head out of his ass. The pounding in his skull was relentless, the desire to punch Flash almost too much, yet he doubted his own strength. With a defiant straightening of his spine, he attempted to muster a withering stare. "Back off, Eugene." Flash emitted a derisive snort. "Or what?" "Back off." The confrontation escalated swiftly. Under normal circumstances, Peter would have remained immovable, but the sensory overload left him vulnerable. A forceful shove from Flash sent him tumbling to the ground. Just as Ned and MJ were making their way back to Peter, they heard the noise of their friend fall and rushed to his aid, yet Peter lay motionless. "Peter, hey, wake up!" came MJ's voice as she touched the boy's cheek. "MJ?" Ned uttered, revealing a hand smeared with blood from trying to support Peter's head. "I think he struck his head against the table." MJ looked horrified and glanced at Flash. "You asshole, what did you do?" Vivian's face was a mask of horror. "Mr. Stark will have my head for this!" The commotion drew Mr. Harrington from the restroom, his eyes widening at the sight. "Good heavens, Peter!" "Is he bleeding from the ears?" Betty inquired, though her question hung unanswered. "He stumbled," Flash said, his voice tinged with panic. "It wasn't my fault." No one actually witnessed the incident, so no one said that he was lying. No one, that is, except for the cameras. The sound of the elevator arriving silenced the room. Tony Stark emerged, his fury palpable as he made his way to Peter's prone form. "Hey, Ruse," he whispered, cradling the boy's face with tenderness. "Was he okay before this?" MJ responded with a hint of concern. "He seemed to be in an overload, but kept telling us it was fine. I told him to go stay with you." Her voice was cracked. She knew that her boyfriend would be healed soon. He's Spider-Man, for God's sake. But it would be a terrible moment for this to happen, because he clearly is mentally unstable. Tony exhaled a weary sigh and rose to his feet. That stubborn kid. "You!" His voice thundered across the room, zeroing in on Flash. "Get out of my tower! Now!" "Mr. Stark, zip it!" Tony's command cut through the air. "My eyes are everywhere. I suggest find yourself a really good lawyer, because I'm coming for you. And mark my words, if you so much as get near my kid again, I will bring you to ruin. Understood?" Flash could only nod. "And stay away from Ned and Michelle," Tony continued, barely containing his fury. "In fact, avoid troubling anyone. But dare to hurt Peter once more, and..." He trailed off. Ned and MJ couldn't even enjoy that Flash was being chewed out by Mr. Stark, while they tried, to no avail, to wake Peter. Before anyone realised his presence, Happy had materialised, escorting Flash away. "Mr. Stark, I'm sorry, I didn't..." Vivian's apology was cut short. "It's not on you," he assured her with a nod. "Mr. Harrington?" The man, ashen-faced, adjusted his glasses and stepped forward. "Sir, I should have..." Tony had no patience for excuses. He knelt once more beside his protégé, gently lifting him from the teenager's grasp. "Not on you, either." He gathered Peter into his arms. "You're aware that I'm his designated emergency contact?" Mr. Harrington gave a mute nod. "Great. He'll be under my care. I'll inform his aunt." "Absolutely, sir." With Peter in his arms, Tony made his way to the elevator. "Ned, Michelle, I'll keep you updated," he declared, so angry that he didn't even pretend to think that Ned's name was Ted, just before the doors sealed shut. A tense hush fell over the room until a voice pierced the silence. "Is Mr. Stark Peter's father?" Chaos ensued. Consciousness returned to Peter in a gentle wave, his eyes fluttering open to the dimly lit serenity of his bedroom. The familiar ceiling greeted him. A soft groan escaped him as he made a feeble attempt to sit up, only to be met with a firm yet caring hand pressing him back onto the pillow. "Stay put, kid," a voice commanded softly from the room's shadows. It was Tony, his presence a reassuring solidity in the soft glow of the bedside lamp. The room was quiet, save for the occasional distant siren that wove through the night air. It was awesome, even more so because it was clear Tony's attention to every detail. As the fog of disorientation lifted, the events that led to his current state replayed in Peter's mind. The confrontation, the fall, the sharp pain at the back of his head. He reached up tentatively, fingers probing the bandaged wound. In the quiet company of Tony, Peter stayed on the comfort of his bed. There was no need for him to worry now, no audience to witness his vulnerability. He could just be Peter, not Spider-Man, not the unflappable hero, just a kid who had taken a hard fall and a hell of a sensory overload. A kid with a dad to take care of him. "I'm okay," he murmured, the words barely audible. It was a reassurance meant as much for Tony as it was for himself. Tony wanted to talk about the situation. It was like he was burning inside of anger, but Peter needed rest. The logical part of his mind knew that it wasn't that bad, physically talking. The boy was used to take punches, but it felt worse because he had that instinct where Peter was concerned that was a little irrational. Peter was already asleep again. He sighed. For now, it would be better reassure Ned, Michelle and May that their spiderling was fine. The next time Peter blinked his eyes open, he felt someone nudging him awake. "Hey there, kiddo," Tony's familiar voice floated to his ears. "Everything all right?" Memories of a nightmare, a really nasty one, came flooding back, and his heart ached a bit. "Dad?" He barely got the word out of his hazed mind. Tony just stopped in his tracks, and that was enough to snap Peter out of it. I'm sorry, Mr. Stark, I was just..." Before he could go on, Tony wrapped him in such a tight hug that Peter was momentarily stunned. He wasn't quite used to this new, huggy version of Mr. Stark, so it took him a second to return the embrace. Part of him worried he was just imagining this whole new level of their relationship, scared of being too clingy and messing it all up. "It's all good, kiddo," Tony reassured him, planting a kiss on Peter's head before stepping back to get a good look at him. "All good." "Really?" Peter couldn't bring himself to meet Tony's gaze. "You don't think I'm being desperate?" Tony made a thoughtful noise. "Well, I'm not usually one for the touchy-feely stuff, but if you're desperate, then I guess I am too." Peter's brow creased in confusion. "What do you mean?" Tony gave him a soft look. "For such a smart kid, you can be pretty dense, you know." His eyes were gentle. "You're like a son to me, Peter. I'd be over the moon to be your dad." The room went quiet as Peter processed what he'd just heard. Tears welled up in his eyes, and this time, he was the one initiating the hug. He felt like he could stay there forever, safe and secure in his dad's arms, a feeling he remembered having with May and Ben. "Thank you," he whispered into the hug. "Any time, Underoos," came the warm reply. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed. If you liked, please consider subscribing so you don't miss the next chapter. I hope you have a lovely day.